Welcome to TOCHI Stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notification because it will mean the whole world to me. Now, let's get right into the story. Brace yourself. The sharp pain tore through Ada's lower abdomen like a heated blade, slicing her insides. She screamed, her voice echoing through the dimly lit hospital ward. Sweat drenched her face, her hospital gown clinging to her trembling body. Nurses rushed around her, urging her to breathe, to push, to hold on just a little longer. But amidst the chaos of childbirth, Ada's world shattered not because of the pain, but because of the brown envelope handed to her by a silent nurse. Her heart thudded painfully as she struggled to open it with shaky hands. Her eyes scanned the printed lines, and there it was, divorce papers, already signed by her husband, Chuka. A loud, guttural cry escaped her lips, not of labor, but of betrayal. At the very moment she was bringing life into the world, the man she loved had chosen to walk out of hers. Tears blurred her vision, and the weight of 1,000 memories came crashing down on her. She clutched her swollen belly with one hand and the papers with the other. Her breath caught in her throat as another contraction hit, but she no longer cared. The nurse leaned close, alarmed by the sudden spike in her heart rate. "Madam Ada, breathe, please," one of them urged, placing an oxygen mask on her. But Ada had already begun to drown, not from childbirth, but from grief. Outside the hospital, in the comfort of a tinted SUV parked by the gate, Chuka was laughing with Zara, the younger girl he had chosen over her. He had promised her forever and left her in the delivery room alone. He had signed her away as easily as a contract. The nurse watching Ada clenched her jaw in fury, whispering under her breath, "God will judge him." After hours of excruciating labor, a baby's cry pierced the silence. Ada's eyes fluttered open as the nurse gently laid her newborn son on her chest. For a brief moment, time stood still. She stared at the tiny face, so perfect and innocent, and wept silently. She wasn't crying because of the pain anymore. She was crying because he wasn't here to witness this miracle. He wasn't here to cut the cord, to say it's a boy, to cradle his child in trembling arms. No, Chuka had given that moment to someone else. Ada kissed her son's forehead with trembling lips and whispered, "I will never leave you, never." Her hands shook, her soul screamed, but she found strength in the fragile life before her. While one chapter had ended with betrayal, another had just begun, with a vow, with pain, and with the undying love of a mother abandoned in her hour of need. Ada had never imagined herself as one of those women who would beg for love. At 35, she had achieved financial stability through sheer hard work, running a modest catering business that provided services to banks and events across Lagos. But despite her financial freedom, her heart remained void. All her friends were married, some already expecting second children, while Ada carried the constant reminder of being alone like a second skin. It was at a friend's small wedding reception that she met Chuka, a lanky, soft-spoken 27-year-old man who helped serve drinks at the event. He was polite, charming, and quick to compliment her, without any hint of desperation. What struck her most wasn't his good looks or youthful energy. It was the sadness in his eyes. When they spoke, he admitted he was unemployed, struggling to make ends meet, and had recently lost both parents in a road accident. Something in Ada broke open that day. He needed saving, and she needed love. She didn't think twice before offering to help. Within a week, she had invited Chuka to her home under the pretense of offering him a job in her kitchen. In reality, she just wanted to be close to him. When she discovered he was squatting in a dilapidated boys' quarter with no electricity and a leaking roof, she moved him into her guest room. She bought him clothes, real shirts, not faded hand-me-downs from friends, and gave him a phone that wasn't cracked. She added his name to her meal plan and even included him in prayer meetings. Her friends raised their brows, her younger cousins whispered behind her back, and even her pastor gave her a cryptic warning. But Ada silenced them all with a smile. "He's not perfect," she'd say, "but neither am I. He just needs a chance." And she gave him not just a chance, she gave him everything. Every day, she cooked for him, encouraged him to apply for jobs, and comforted him when rejection letters came. In her eyes, he was her man. In his eyes, She was his shelter. Chuka didn't ask her to fall in love with him. He didn't even say, "I love you," when she finally confessed her feelings one rainy afternoon while they were watching a movie. But he didn't say no either. He looked at her, touched her hand gently, and said, "No woman has ever done what you've done for me. Thank you." That was all Ada needed to hear. She convinced herself that his quietness was just emotional trauma, and that one day he would open up. When he slept in her bed for the first time, she felt a spark of youth she thought she had lost forever. She clung to him like a second chance at life, desperate to create the family she had always dreamed of. She ignored the signs, how he avoided deep conversations, how he never introduced her to his friends, and how he always locked his phone. Her heart, so hungry for affection, justified it all as the struggle of a young man trying to find his feet. In her eyes, she wasn't just loving him, she was building him. In reality, she was setting the stage for her own heartbreak. The wedding was more of a formality than a celebration. Chuka never proposed. There was no bended knee, no surprise dinner, no teary-eyed moment of joy. Instead, it was Ada who suggested they get married, not just out of love, but also out of the fear that her biological clock was ticking too fast. She offered to sponsor the entire event and told him she'd make it simple so he wouldn't feel emasculated. He shrugged and agreed, more interested in the new iPhone she bought him as a pre-wedding gift. Ada paid for both rings, arranged the court marriage, and hosted a modest traditional ceremony in her village. Chuka wore the white kaftan she bought him and smiled for the cameras, but his eyes remained distant. Ada didn't care. She was finally a bride. She posted their wedding photos on Facebook, adding captions like "True love waits," while deleting comments from friends who questioned her judgment. She moved him fully into her home, and for a brief moment, she felt she had arrived. But marriage revealed what courtship had hidden. Chuka grew more distant, less patient, and more entitled. He no longer said thank you when she cooked. He left dirty plates on the table and demanded food like a king. Ada, ever patient, chalked it up to adjustment pains. When she suggested he start helping with her catering business while searching for work, he laughed and said, "Me? Serve food? Do I look like a woman to you?" It was only then that Ada realized her husband didn't believe in hard work. He believed in shortcuts. She caught him chatting flirtatiously with women online, but he always accused her of being insecure and old. She apologized each time just to keep the peace. She began to live in denial, covering his flaws with expensive clothes and public smiles. He had no interest in building with her. He was only interested in spending what she had already built. Still, Ada tried to fix it. She bought him a car in hopes it would motivate him to start Uber. Instead, he used the car to cruise around the city with his friends and hang out at lounges. She paid his bills, his subscriptions, even his parents' medical expenses. When his mother called to thank her, he angrily warned Ada never to let his family think he couldn't take care of them. She apologized again. She started to hide the bruises of emotional abuse behind makeup and perfume. She told herself that it was just a phase, and that all marriages had their storms. But deep inside, she was sinking. Her home, once her sanctuary, had become a stage where she performed love alone. The wedding she had paid for with her savings had become a prison, and every day, the man she called husband built more walls between them. Ada's daily routine became a cycle of sacrifice. She woke up at 4:30 a.m. to prepare meals for clients, while also making breakfast for Chuka, who always slept in until late morning. By 7 a.m., she would load her car with coolers and head off to deliver food to banks, schools, and offices. On most days, she came home past 6 p.m., tired and swollen-footed, only to find Chuka sprawled on the couch, scrolling on his phone or playing video games. When she complained, he would scoff and say, "You're not the first woman to work, please." But she would still serve his dinner, massage his feet, and tuck him in. Sometimes, when he felt like it, he would touch her in bed, but only to satisfy himself. There was no affection, no romance, only obligation. Still, Ada endured. Her love wasn't just romantic, it was maternal, sacrificial, and consuming. When she felt pregnant, she thought it would change things. She imagined him touching her belly, planning baby names, attending antenatal visits. But instead, Chuka became even more withdrawn. He accused her of trying to trap him with a baby, and openly doubted if he was the father. His late-night outings increased, and he began spending time with a new girl, Zara, a younger, curvy partygoer he met at a lounge. Ada discovered the affair by accident when she saw text messages on his phone filled with heart emojis and promises of a new life together. When she confronted him, he didn't deny it. "You're too old for me, Ada," he spat. "I'm tired of pretending." That night, Ada cried herself to sleep on the floor while he left with Zara, slamming the door behind him. The next day, she wore sunglasses to hide her puffy eyes and went back to work. Still, she clung to the hope that once the baby came, things would change. She bought baby clothes, decorated a nursery alone, and went for her final scan without him. She even organized a small baby shower for herself, attended only by 2 co-workers and a distant cousin. She lied to them that Chuka was busy with work. The truth was he had traveled to Calabar with Zara for a weekend getaway, using the money Ada gave him to pay NEPA bills. At 9 months pregnant, Ada slipped and fell while carrying water up the stairs. She called Chuka in pain, but he ignored her calls. That night, she held her belly and whispered, "Please hold on for Mummy." Her water broke the next morning. As she rushed to the hospital in a neighbor's Kiki Napep, she still believed he would come. But what arrived instead was the brown envelope, and with it, the death of everything she had ever hoped for. The day Ada discovered she was pregnant should have been the happiest day of her life. After years of negative tests and tearful disappointments, the 2 bold lines on the pregnancy stick looked like a miracle. She sat on the bathroom floor, crying and laughing at the same time. Her hands trembled as she held the test close to her heart, whispering prayers of thanks. In her mind, this baby would fix everything. It would melt Chuka's indifference, revive their love, and maybe, just maybe, give her the family she had always dreamed of. She couldn't wait to share the news. She cooked his favorite meal, dressed up in one of the pretty gowns he liked, and even placed a baby-sized onesie on the dining table, wrapped in a ribbon. But when he walked in that night, reeking of alcohol and perfume, he barely glanced at the effort. "What's this?" he asked coldly. Ada smiled, her heart pounding. "We're having a baby," she whispered. Instead of excitement, Chuka's face hardened. "How do you know it's mine?" he said flatly. Her heart dropped into a dark, cold pit. The accusation struck deeper than any slap. Ada stood frozen, the ribbon in her hand unraveling slowly, like her dreams. "What do you mean?" she asked, tears welling in her eyes. Chuka scoffed, picked up the onesie, and tossed it aside like trash. "You've been desperate to get pregnant. Who knows what you've been doing behind my back?" His words were venomous, but the worst part was the calmness in his tone, like he truly believed it. Ada tried to defend herself, but he waved her off and stormed into the bedroom. That night, she lay awake, her hand on her stomach, trying to convince herself that things would get better. Over the next few weeks, she tried everything, sending him loving texts, making special dinners, and even booking couples counseling. But nothing worked. Chuka became a ghost in her own home, barely speaking to her, sleeping in a separate room, and spending more time outside than in. When she asked for help with chores, he claimed he wasn't a housemaid. When she needed emotional support, he mocked her hormonal tears. Her pregnancy became a lonely battle, and yet she kept fighting, for him, for their future, for the child growing inside her. As her belly grew, so did her isolation. She took on fewer catering jobs and had to hire someone to assist her. Chuka refused to help financially, claiming he was broke, even though Ada noticed new clothes and gadgets appearing every few weeks. She discovered he had been giving money, her money, to Zara. One day, after a routine checkup, she returned home to find Chuka hosting Zara and her friends in their living room, drinking and laughing. Ada stood at the door, stunned. Chuka didn't even flinch. "You're home early," he said casually, not bothering to hide the betrayal. Zara giggled, clearly enjoying Ada's discomfort. That night, Ada cried on the floor of the nursery she was preparing for their baby. She had painted the walls yellow and blue, placed stuffed animals in the corner, and ordered a baby cot online. She had even written a note to Chuka saying, "Can't wait for us to raise our little one together." Now, that note sat in the bin, torn in half. The dream was slipping away, and she didn't know how to hold it together anymore. Zara was everything Ada was not: young, curvy, light-skinned, and carefree. She didn't have to work hard to impress Chuka. She just had to exist. Ada watched her from a distance, trying to understand what made her so captivating. But the more she observed, the more it hurt. Zara didn't cook, clean, or build anything with Chuka. She simply received. She laughed at his jokes, held his hand in public, and wore the clothes Ada had bought. Chuka took her to fancy restaurants, while Ada ate leftovers at home. He posted Zara's pictures on his WhatsApp status, but never once posted their wedding photos. He'd once told Ada that he didn't believe in showing off, but apparently, Zara was worth flaunting. The final blow came when Ada discovered that the same car she had bought for Chuka to start Uber was now registered in Zara's name. She had trusted him with her money, her home, and her future, and now she was watching him build a new life with someone else, right in front of her eyes. One evening, desperate to salvage what little was left, Ada dressed up and went to the lounge where she knew they usually hung out. She walked in, her swollen belly leading the way, determined to remind Chuka that she still mattered. But when he saw her, his face twisted in irritation, not guilt. "What are you doing here?" he asked harshly, rising from his seat. Zara looked up from her cocktail and smirked. "Is that your mom?" she whispered loud enough for Ada to hear. The lounge erupted in muffled laughter. Chuka didn't defend her. He didn't stop them. He just told Ada to leave. "You're embarrassing yourself," he said, before walking her to the door, not out of care, but to get her out of sight. Outside, the security guard looked at her with pity, helping her into a cab as she sobbed uncontrollably. That night, Ada stared at her reflection in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back. She had sacrificed everything for a man who now looked at her like a burden. Her womb carried his child, but his heart belonged to someone else. As her due date approached, Chuka's cruelty intensified. He began ignoring her calls completely. When she sent him photos of the baby clothes she had bought, he left her on red. One morning, she opened her bank app to find a large withdrawal she didn't authorize. He had transferred money to Zara again. When she confronted him, he shouted at her, accusing her of trying to control him with money and a baby. "I didn't ask you to get pregnant," he yelled. "That's your business." The words stung worse than any slap. Ada sank to the floor, her hands gripping her belly as tears soaked her wrapper. She had reached her limit. The woman who once believed love could conquer all was now shell, hollowed out by betrayal. She didn't care about titles or appearances anymore. She just wanted peace, even if it meant walking away. But before she could make that decision, Chuka made it for her by preparing the divorce papers behind her back. Ada had always believed that love was about sacrifice, but she never imagined that hers would be the only one sacrificing. At 8 months pregnant, she could barely sleep. Her ankles were swollen, her back ached, and she often felt dizzy. But still, she got up each morning to make breakfast for a man who barely acknowledged her existence. She stopped attending church, ashamed of the rumors circulating about her crumbling marriage. Some people said she trapped Chuka with a pregnancy. Others claimed she paid for everything because she was desperate. No one really knew the truth, and Ada no longer had the strength to explain. Every time she opened her mouth to defend herself, a sob would rise instead. The house felt like a graveyard, silent, cold, and haunted by memories of a love that once felt real. Then came the night that would change everything. Ada had just returned from the hospital after her final prenatal checkup. She was exhausted and hungry, but when she entered the kitchen, she found the fridge empty. All the groceries she had bought a few days ago were gone. Confused, she opened the cabinets. Nothing. Her pulse quickened as she checked her phone. There were no messages from Chuka. At that moment, a neighbor knocked on her door with an awkward smile. "They were having a party downstairs," she said carefully. "I saw your husband. I think he took some things from the house." Ada didn't respond. She simply nodded, closed the door, and leaned against it for support. Her baby kicked, as if sensing her pain. That night, she drank Gary and cried herself to sleep. The next morning, she confronted Chuka when he finally returned home, smelling of beer and perfume. "You cleared our food, our baby's things for a party?" she asked, her voice trembling. He looked at her with a mix of disgust and irritation. "You mean your food?" he snapped. "Because everything here belongs to you, right? You're the boss, right? Miss Provider." Before she could respond, he raised his hand and slapped her across the face. The world spun. Ada fell backward, more from shock than the force of the slap. She clutched her stomach, gasping, while Chuka walked away, without a word. The silence was deafening. That night, Ada packed a small hospital bag and slept on the floor beside it. Her contractions began the next morning. And as she was wheeled into the hospital screaming in pain, she kept checking the door, hoping he would walk in. But he didn't. All that came was a nurse with a brown envelope. And just like that, the love she had nurtured with tears and prayers ended with silence, ink, and a signature. The moment Ada returned from the hospital with her newborn son, she stood outside her apartment, confused by the padlock on her own front door. She knocked, called Chuka's number several times, but there was no response. Neighbors watched from behind curtains, whispering. A woman who had given her leftover jollof rice months ago came out and shook her head pitifully. "He moved out 2 days ago with a younger girl. Told the landlord you had traveled and wouldn't be returning. He even said you abandoned the house." Ada's breath caught in her throat as her knees buckled. She held her baby tighter, shielding him from the reality of their sudden homelessness. A boda man helped her sit on the pavement while her baby began to cry. In that moment, she realized she had nothing. No keys, no home, no support system. Her baby whimpered, hungry and cold. And Ada had no formula, no diaper bag, no food. Only the crumpled discharge letter from the hospital, and a wrapper tied around her waist. The man she fed, clothed, and loved had left her to rot like trash. She spent that night on a wooden bench outside a closed pharmacy across the street. Her son, swaddled in an extra wrapper someone lent her, cried intermittently through the night. Ada tried to soothe him with gentle hums, even as her heart shattered. Hunger gnawed at her stomach like rats clawing from within. Her breasts leaked with milk, her body still sore from labor. But there was no bathroom, no bed, no pillow, just her faith and a stubborn will to survive. At dawn, she gathered herself and walked to a nearby church compound. The security guard refused her entry at first, until she fell to her knees, begging for a place to stay for the day. "Just let me sit here with my baby, please." Something about her desperation moved the man, and he opened the gate. She spent the next 24 hours inside the church's backyard, leaning against a wall, praying for mercy. People passed by her, some tossing her coins, others just staring. She had gone from a homeowner to a street beggar in less than 48 hours, all because of a man who once said he loved her. On the second day, as she sat on the church steps humming to her baby, her phone, dead for 2 days, buzzed to life after charging briefly at the security office. She noticed a missed call and a text from an unknown number. "Urgent. Call this number. Mr. Damien Okechukwu." Her heart raced. That was her father's name. A man she hadn't spoken to in 10 years. They had been estranged after he remarried and Ada's mother passed away. She remembered sending him a letter when she got married, but he never responded. Her fingers shook as she dialed the number. A male voice answered calmly. "Ms. Ada Okechukwu?" She affirmed. "This is Barrister Nwosu. I'm calling regarding the last will and testament of your father, Mr. Damien. He passed last week. You're the sole beneficiary of his estate. Please report to the firm as soon as possible." Ada dropped the phone. The world around her spun. Her father was gone, but he had left her something. No, he had left her everything. Ada sat across from the tall, well-dressed lawyer in a sleek office filled with bookcases and certificates. Her baby, sleeping in her arms, breathed softly against her chest. Her mind was still grappling with the idea that just 2 days ago she had been on a bench outside a pharmacy, and now she was sitting in one of the most prestigious law firms in the city. Barrister Nwosu handed her a folder filled with documents. "Your father made considerable wealth through oil and real estate before his retirement," he explained. Despite your years of estrangement, he monitored your life from a distance. When he learned about your marriage and pregnancy, he instructed us to update his will. Everything, including 5 houses, 7 vehicles, multiple offshore accounts, and company shares, has been left to you and your child. Ada's lips parted in disbelief. She looked down at the sleeping baby and then back at the papers. The names were there, the signatures too. This wasn't a dream. She was a billionaire's heir, and the wife Chuka discarded like garbage was now one of the richest women in the city. The lawyer continued. He also left a note. Would you like to read it? Ada nodded slowly. She opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Her father's handwriting filled the page, raw and remorseful. My Ada, I know I wasn't the best father. I let you grow without my guidance. But I never stopped watching. When I saw how that boy treated you, it broke me. I had people looking out for you, even if you never knew. This wealth is not a replacement for my love, but it is my apology. Use it to rise. Use it to raise that child with the dignity and power that no man can take away. Love, Daddy. By the end, Ada was sobbing. Years of rejection, abandonment, and struggle came crashing down. All the tears she had held back in Chuka's house now flowed freely. The pain had finally birthed a purpose. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was the custodian of a legacy. Within a week, her life transformed. A brand new SUV arrived to pick her and her son from the church. She was escorted to a gated estate in Lekki Phase 1, where staff were waiting to serve her. The house was enormous, 6 bedrooms, 2 living rooms, and a pool. A nanny was assigned to her son, and she was introduced to a financial advisor who would help her manage her father's wealth. But even in all the grandeur, Ada struggled to sleep. The silence of the mansion was different from the silence of her old flat. This one echoed with opportunity, not regret. She spent most nights awake, breastfeeding her son and replaying the past. She thought about all the meals she had cooked for Chuka, the nights she cried alone, the days she scraped her last naira for rent. She could hear his voice calling her old mama, see Zara's mocking smile. But now she had the power to rewrite her story. And her first step would be building a home for abandoned women, just like her. News spread like wildfire. Blogs posted photos of Ada at the lawyer's office. Headlines screamed, "A strange daughter of late billionaire inherits empire." Her face became familiar to the city almost overnight. And it didn't take long before the whispers reached Chuka. He was lounging at Zara's flat, his new home, scrolling through Instagram when he saw a photo of Ada, dressed in a silk blue gown, standing beside Barrister Nwosu. The caption read, "Billionaire's daughter rises from ashes." He blinked, confused. That was his Ada? His jaw clenched as he read further. Inherited over 5 billion in real estate, vehicles, shares, and offshore accounts. His hands trembled. Zara walked into the room, asking for airtime. Chuka ignored her. He refreshed the page again and again. Every article told the same story. The woman he discarded was now more powerful than he could ever imagine. He stormed out of the house in a rage, not even realizing he had walked barefoot into the street. Meanwhile, Ada was adjusting to her new life. Every day felt like a contradiction. She was still healing from stitches and heartbreak, yet now surrounded by wealth beyond her comprehension. She refused to let luxury distract her. Instead of shopping or showing off, she began planning the launch of the Phoenix Foundation, a home for abandoned pregnant women and single mothers. She hired professionals, created a board, and purchased a building in Surulere. Her focus was sharp. She wasn't chasing validation anymore. She was building legacy. When asked in a press interview what motivated her, she simply said, "I know what it feels like to be discarded while giving life." Her sincerity captivated millions. The public fell in love with her, not just for her wealth, but for her heart. Women began to call her the mother of the rejected. She had been broken, but now she was a healer. But not everyone was celebrating her rise. Chuka, now jobless, had been kicked out by Zara after a loud argument. He was sleeping in a friend's shop, living off pure water and groundnut. One evening, he swallowed his pride and tried to reach out to Ada. He called her number. It no longer worked. He walked to her old house. Someone else lived there. He messaged her on Facebook. His account was blocked. It was as if she had vanished, replaced by a queen in armor. And for the first time since he left her, Chuka began to cry, not from pride, but from regret. Deep, soul-wrenching regret. He remembered how she used to cook jollof rice with smoked fish, the way she rubbed his feet when he was sick, how she called him my king, even when he acted like a devil. He buried his head in his hands and whispered, "What have I done?" But it was too late. The woman he left in labor now had an empire, and he was nothing but a ghost in her past. Ada no longer looked like the woman who once cried on the cold floor of a cramped apartment. Her transformation wasn't just physical. It was spiritual, emotional, and mental. With the help of stylists and wellness experts, her once weary face now glowed with confidence. Her once overworked arms now cradled her child with ease. Her steps, once slow with burden, were now firm with purpose. She didn't just wear designer clothes. She wore dignity. Yet, even as her image graced magazine covers and her name topped philanthropy headlines, Ada kept her past close. Each time she held her baby, she remembered crying through contractions with divorce papers in her hand. That pain had become her compass. It reminded her that no matter how much wealth she had inherited, it was her resilience that had built her. With every televised interview and donation event, Ada whispered prayers for strength. She wasn't healing for show. She was healing for survival. The Phoenix Foundation became her heart's project. She personally visited the homes of abandoned women, interviewed single mothers, and sat on bare floors listening to their stories. Some had been raped and cast aside. Others were victims of arranged marriages gone wrong. All of them saw Ada as hope personified. She didn't speak to them from a pedestal. She sat beside them and said, "I've slept outside a hospital with a newborn too." Her vulnerability made her a legend. She didn't donate out of guilt or charity. She gave because she remembered. She poured millions into setting up shelters, daycare centers, and vocational schools across Lagos. Every wall painted, every bed laid, every meal served carried her fingerprints. The more she gave, the stronger she felt. But even in her strength, her scars remained. Every night, when the world went quiet, Ada still cried sometimes, not because she missed Chuka, but because she once believed she wasn't enough. The past haunted her less, but it never fully disappeared. On some nights, she would lie in her mansion's master bedroom, her baby cooing beside her, and stare at the ceiling for hours. Her mind would replay moments like a broken film, Chuka's insults, his slaps, the night he cleared the kitchen for a party. Sometimes she questioned her own sanity. "Why did I stay that long?" she'd whisper to herself. The truth was painful. She had stayed because she didn't believe love would find her again. She had stayed because she feared loneliness more than disrespect. Now surrounded by staff, wealth, and honor, she no longer feared being alone. She had learned that peace wasn't found in a man's arms. It was found in her own embrace. She kissed her son's forehead and whispered, "You are all the love I need." It was in that space of silence and solitude that Ada fully bloomed. Not because she was now rich, but because she had finally realized her worth. Chuka's life had fallen apart in slow, humiliating stages. First, Zara left. Then his job disappeared. Then his so-called friends, many of whom had only hung around for drinks and bragging rights, stopped picking his calls. He pawned the watch Ada had bought him on their first anniversary for a fraction of its worth. His once prized sneakers, which he used to clean religiously, now sat under a stranger's bed after he sold them for food. His days blurred into each other, wandering the streets of Lagos, dodging creditors, begging for food, and pretending not to notice the disgust in people's eyes. The worst was when he saw Ada's face on a billboard outside a supermarket. She was smiling, holding a child, his child. The caption read, "Every woman deserves a second chance." Sponsored by the Phoenix Foundation. Chuka stood there for a full hour, watching people take selfies with her face behind them. His throat burned. That woman used to massage his feet. That woman once cried over his cheating. Now she was the city's queen, and he was nothing more than dust on her heels. One afternoon, Chuka visited an old friend in Ajagunal, hoping for a loan or at least a couch to sleep on. The friend let him stay for a night but kicked him out by morning, citing family pressure. Chuka tried calling his relatives, but no one responded. The same people who had once praised him for marrying a working-class woman now mocked him behind closed doors. The few family members who sympathized with Ada were ashamed of him. Hunger became a daily war. He often skipped meals, eating Gary with no sugar and sleeping under market stalls. At night, he'd scroll through Facebook with a cracked phone and watch Ada's new life unfold. She had launched a hospital wing. She had spoken at an international conference. She had opened a vocational center for single fathers, something that stung him deeply. She even thinks about men, he muttered bitterly. But what hurt more was the smile on her face. It wasn't fake anymore. It wasn't desperate. It was real. Eventually, Chuka's pride cracked. He began asking people if they knew how to reach her. But Ada had changed her number. Her social media accounts were managed by professionals. Her estate had tight security. And even her charity staff didn't have direct access to her. Chuka tried visiting the Phoenix Foundation, claiming he was her ex-husband, but was met with cold stares. "You mean the man who abandoned her in labor?" one guard asked mockingly. Ashamed, Chuka walked away. Still, something inside him refused to give up. One night, he found his way to the gate of Ada's estate and waited. Rain fell. Mosquitoes bit. But he stayed, leaning against the wall like a beggar. He hadn't come for money, not at first. He just wanted to say sorry, to see the child he left behind, to maybe touch a shadow of what he once destroyed. But the gates never opened. And inside, Ada had no idea he was there. She was reading her son a bedtime story, completely unaware that the man who once broke her was now sleeping in the dirt outside her mansion. For 3 days, Chuka waited outside Ada's estate. He sat on the sidewalk across the gate, watching black SUVs enter and exit, hoping that one of them would be hers. He hadn't bathed. His shirt was stained. His eyes sunken from days of little sleep and less food. He tried speaking to one of the security men on the 3rd day, but they waved him off like a fly. "This place is not a refuge camp, a beg," one of them snapped. Chuka backed away, humiliated. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. His lips were dry and cracked, and his stomach made loud, painful noises. That afternoon, he collapsed from exhaustion. A hawker who had seen him over the past days brought him sachet water and a small loaf of bread. "You be her husband before, ABI?" she asked quietly. He nodded. She shook her head with pity. "You finish gold, and now you day fine broom." Chuka didn't even argue. He just chewed the bread slowly, tears falling freely down his face. He used to eat roasted fish and jollof rice made by Ada. Now he was swallowing dry bread given to him out of pity. What haunted him the most wasn't even the hunger, it was the memory. He remembered the way Ada used to call his name softly when he came home late. The way she once spent 3 days looking for a rare medicine when he had a fever. The time she borrowed money to pay his mother's hospital bill. The way she kissed his forehead before going to work. All those moments returned to him like ghosts of a life he destroyed with his own hands. She was never the problem, he whispered to himself. I was. His voice cracked with grief. He leaned against the wall and stared up at the mansion's high fence. His son was in there. The baby he never held. The boy whose name he didn't know. That realization shattered him more than anything else. He didn't even deserve to be called a father. All he had ever done was take, and when she needed him most, he gave her nothing but silence and a signature. The next morning, something unexpected happened. A small boy, about 4 years old, ran out through the gate with a nanny chasing behind. The boy paused at the sidewalk where Chuka sat, looked at him curiously, and asked, "Uncle, are you hungry?" Chuka's eyes widened. The boy had Ada's eyes. He had his nose. Before Chuka could speak, the nanny grabbed the child, apologized, and hurried back into the compound. But it was enough. Chuka broke down completely. That was his son. The boy he never rocked to sleep. The baby he never kissed. He buried his face in his hands and wept. For the first time, not out of shame, not out of pride, but out of pure, raw regret. He had sold gold for gravel. He had thrown away a diamond, and was now crawling through dust for crumbs. He knew it was too late to ask for love, but maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to say sorry. The next morning, Chuka gathered what little strength he had left and approached the estate gate again, not to beg for food, but to request to see Ada. His voice cracked as he spoke to the security guard, who looked at him with cold eyes. "I'm her husband. I was. Please, I just want to apologize," Chuka said, barely audible. The guard rolled his eyes. "You again?" "A beg, Oga. She no day see visitors from past life. Go day your day." Chuka dropped to his knees, holding the man's shoes. "I'm not here to beg for money. I just want to see my son. Please." Something in his voice struck the guard, who radioed someone inside the compound. A few minutes later, another security officer came out. "Madam say you no fit enter, but if you want talk, she say come tomorrow to the foundation office. She go decide if she go see you." Chuka nodded in shame, slowly rising to his feet. The fact that Ada had even responded gave him a sliver of hope. That night, he found a place under a bridge to sleep, clutching his jacket against the cold wind, whispering, "Tomorrow. Just tomorrow." When the next day came, Chuka bathed at a public tap, and used a borrowed razor to scrape the beard off his gaunt face. He wore his least tattered clothes, and walked to the Phoenix Foundation headquarters. When he arrived, he was made to wait in the reception hall, sitting among women nursing babies and teenagers holding forms. Everyone stared at him, confused. He didn't look like he belonged. After nearly 2 hours, an assistant came out and called his name. He was led into a private meeting room with white walls, gold decor, and an atmosphere of healing. Moments later, the door opened, and Ada walked in. Chuka stood, stunned. She was breathtaking, graceful, regal. She wore a fitted burgundy gown and heels that clicked softly as she moved. She had the calmness of someone who had cried enough tears to flood an ocean. Ada looked at him, emotionless, and said, "5 minutes." Chuka fell to his knees immediately. "Ada, I don't deserve to look you in the eye. I know that. But I beg you, just hear me. I didn't come for money. I don't want anything. I just want to say, I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry." Tears streamed down his face as he spoke, his voice shaking. "You fed me, clothed me, gave me a roof, and all I did was repay you with insults. You were my miracle, Ada. And I walked away from you like a fool. I didn't just abandon you, I abandoned my own child. And I've been dying inside every day since." He sobbed uncontrollably. Ada stood silent, watching him. Her face was unreadable. When he finished, she took a deep breath and said, "You left me while I was pushing your child into this world. You fed another woman with the money I gave you to feed us. You signed those divorce papers while I was in labor, Chuka. Do you even understand what that means?" Chuka nodded, still weeping. "I do now. And it's killing me." Ada didn't reply immediately. Her arms folded across her chest, but her eyes betrayed the storm behind her calm exterior. "I didn't cry when you left," she said quietly. "I didn't cry when I slept outside with our child, when I begged to be let into a church, or when I was laughed at for wearing the same wrapper for 3 days. But today, seeing you like this, I feel nothing. Not hate, not anger, just emptiness." Her voice cracked, and she turned away slightly. Chuka lowered his head, the silence between them heavy and painful. "You don't have to forgive me," he whispered. "But please let me see my son. Let me hold him once. Just once." Ada shook her head, biting her lip. "You want to hold the boy you never bought a diaper for? The one you refused to claim? The one you called a mistake?" Chuka's face twisted with grief. "I was a coward. I didn't know how to be a man. I know that now." Ada stared at him. "And what would holding him do for him? For you?" Before Ada could say more, a voice from behind interrupted them. "Mummy." It was her son, standing at the door with his nanny. Ada turned, shocked to see him there. She hadn't realized he followed her into the building. The boy looked at Chuka and smiled. "That's the uncle I saw outside." Chuka's breath caught in his throat. His son had his smile, his dimples, his blood. Ada quickly walked to her son, kneeling to block his view. "Baby, go with Nanny, okay? Mummy's in a meeting." The boy nodded obediently, but looked over her shoulder. "Why is that uncle crying?" he asked. Chuka couldn't stop the tears. "Because I made the biggest mistake of my life," he whispered. The boy tilted his head. "Will you say sorry to Mummy?" Chuka nodded. "I already did." The boy smiled. "Then you can be my friend." His innocence shattered the air like glass. Ada stood, trembling. Her son's words pierced every layer of pain she had buried. After the boy left, Chuka broke down again. "He doesn't even know me, but he forgave me." Ada's lips trembled. "He's a child, Chuka. He doesn't know betrayal. He doesn't know abandonment. He only knows love. I won't let you poison that." Chuka raised his hands. "I don't want to. I just want to be part of his life. Not to take anything, just to give what I should have given years ago." Ada looked into his eyes, searching for the man she once loved. She didn't find him, but she found something else: remorse. Genuine remorse. And though her heart had long stopped beating for him, something inside her softened, not for Chuka, but for the boy who deserved to know the truth. "You will not come to my house. You will not speak to him directly. But I will let you be around once in a while. Supervised. For his sake, not yours." Chuka nodded, overwhelmed. "Thank you. I promise I won't disappoint you again." Ada walked away slowly, her shoulders still heavy. Forgiveness hadn't come, but mercy had. The next few weeks were strange for Ada. She wasn't used to the idea of Chuka being around, even if it was limited, structured, and strictly for her son's benefit. At first, she kept her distance during those supervised moments, watching silently as Chuka interacted with a child under the eye of a social worker from the Phoenix Foundation. Her son, always excited to see Uncle Chuka, would run to him, asking questions, showing drawings, and bragging about his toy collection. Ada noticed how Chuka never touched him without permission and always knelt to his level when speaking. There was a gentleness now, a broken humility in the way he carried himself. It was as though the arrogance and entitlement had been scraped off him like old paint. She didn't trust it yet, but she observed quietly. Her heart, though stitched and scarred, hadn't turned to stone. She remained cautious, reminding herself of the pain, the nights of hunger, the loneliness she had endured, just to protect her son. One rainy afternoon, Ada stood by the foundation office window and saw Chuka helping carry food bags for some of the women at the shelter. He wore second-hand jeans, slippers, and a polo shirt with a small tear at the collar. Yet he worked diligently, never asking for recognition, never mentioning their past. He greeted her politely when their paths crossed, eyes always lowered, voice always calm. One day, he approached her outside the boys' school compound. "I know this will be my last chance to say this," he said quietly. "You are the strongest woman I've ever known. I lost everything, and I deserved it. But he gestured toward their son, he deserves the best of us. Even if that means I stay in the background forever, I will. Just thank you for not turning him against me." Ada stared at him for a long moment. "I didn't do it for you," she said. "I did it so he never has to heal from what I had to survive." That night, as she tucked her son into bed, he looked up at her and asked, "Will Uncle Chuka ever live with us?" Ada paused, her throat tightening. "No, baby. But he'll always care about you. And that's enough." The boy nodded and drifted to sleep, unaware of the history that lingered behind every answer. Ada walked to the balcony of her mansion, staring at the city lights. Somewhere down there, Chuka was probably walking to a shelter bed, eating donated rice. The old her would have felt pity. The current her felt peace. She had survived abandonment, humiliation, childbirth alone, and homelessness. Now, she was not just surviving, she was thriving. And though she hadn't forgiven Chuka, she had forgiven herself for once believing that love required suffering. As she turned back into her room, she whispered a final vow to herself and her son. "Never again will I shrink to keep a man. My love will never be my weakness again." Despite the structured arrangement with Chuka, Ada found herself slowly unraveling. Every time he came near, even from a distance, Old wounds throbbed like fresh cuts. There were days when she would hear him laugh with their son, and her stomach would twist, not out of jealousy, but memory. She remembered how that same voice once laughed with Zara, while she bled emotionally in silence. She remembered the same man clearing their kitchen to feed strangers at a party, while she nursed their unborn child. No amount of humility in him now could fully erase the past. It wasn't bitterness, it was trauma. And though she tried to keep a composed front, Ada found herself crying again at night. The difference now was she no longer cried out of helplessness. She cried because she knew she could never go back. Forgiveness was not always the reopening of doors. Sometimes it was the final nail in the coffin of a relationship long dead. One Saturday morning, Ada overheard a conversation between her son and Chuka. The boy had asked why they didn't all live together like other families. Chuka, with a voice coated in regret, had said, "Because I hurt Mummy a lot. And some hurts take time to heal." Ada, standing nearby, felt her throat close up. She appreciated the honesty, but it didn't soften the ache. That night, she called Chuka into her private office. "Let's talk," she said. He sat on the opposite end of the desk, his eyes heavy with anticipation. "What are your plans?" she asked. "What do you want from me?" From him. Chuka hesitated. "I want to be present. Consistently. Not as your husband. I've forfeited that. But as his father. I know I can't erase what I did, but I want to be better." Ada nodded slowly. "And what if I remarry someday?" she asked, eyes locking with his. Chuka swallowed hard. "Then I'll respect that. But I'll never disappear from his life again. Never." Ada leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "I don't want confusion for my child. If you're in his life, it must be with clarity and boundaries. No fake promises. No missed visits. No disappearing acts." Chuka agreed immediately, his voice almost breaking. "I will abide by any rule you give. I just want to be worthy of being called Daddy, even if it takes the rest of my life." For a moment, the room fell silent. Ada looked at him, truly looked at him, not the broken man begging, but the shadow of the man she once loved. She didn't pity him. She didn't hate him. She just saw him. And, in that clarity, she finally said it. "I forgive you, Chuka, but I will never forget. Not for revenge, but because the pain molded me. It made me who I am." Chuka bowed his head, tears falling. "Thank you," he whispered. Ada stood, walked to the door, and added, "Now leave. I need to be alone." And as he stepped out, she exhaled deeply. For the first time, the pain had left her lips without shattering her. The following week, Ada received a handwritten envelope slipped under the door of her office at the foundation. The handwriting was shaky, unfamiliar, but honest. She opened it, and inside was a 4-page letter from Chuka. It wasn't a plea or a request, it was a confession. In it, Chuka poured his heart onto paper. He wrote about the first time he met her, how he was intimidated by her strength, but drawn to her warmth. He admitted to using her in the beginning, seeing her as a means of survival. But over time, he confessed, he began to truly admire her. Yet that admiration turned into fear. He feared not being good enough, feared being exposed as a fraud, and instead of rising to match her, he shrank away into infidelity and pride. He wrote, "I thought Zara was freedom, but what I left behind was love dressed in dignity. I broke the only home I ever truly had." He described the nights he spent walking the streets, eating from dustbins, getting rejected by people who once envied him. He described how it felt to see her on TV, glowing, fulfilled, powerful, while he nursed a sprained ankle and broken pride under a pedestrian bridge. He recounted the first time their son called him Uncle Chuka, and how it cut deeper than any insult. "That boy, our son, he has your strength, your kindness. He looks at me like I'm a giant, not knowing I've been a coward. But now I want to grow into the man he already thinks I am." He ended the letter not by begging for reconciliation, but with gratitude. "Thank you, Ada. Not for forgiving me, but for surviving me, for rising, for showing me that strength doesn't scream, it endures. I will never again be the reason you cry. That is my vow." Ada sat in her chair for nearly an hour, the letter trembling in her hands. She wept, not because she loved him again, but because she finally felt seen. All the sleepless nights, the betrayal, the labor pains, the hunger, the homelessness, it was finally acknowledged. Not by the world, not by fans, but by the very man who inflicted it. She folded the letter gently, placed it in a box where she kept her son's hospital wristband and her torn wedding photo, and whispered, "This is closure." That night she didn't cry. She kissed her son goodnight, lit a candle in her prayer room, and thanked God for healing. She had walked through fire, carrying a child, dragging a broken heart, and wearing a smile no one saw. Now she was whole, and those scars remained. They no longer hurt. They just reminded her of how far she had come. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. Chuka remained consistent. He showed up for his son's school presentations, took part in foundation fatherhood workshops, and kept his distance from Ada as agreed. People began to notice his change. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't desperate. He was simply present. Ada, too, had grown. Her foundation expanded into 3 more states, and she was invited to speak at the United Nations Women's Summit. Her story inspired millions, and yet she always told it with grace. She never painted herself as a victim, only as a survivor. She never demonized Chuka in public, even when she had every right to. One day a reporter asked her, "Would you ever take him back?" And she replied, "I already have what I prayed for. A son who loves me and peace that money can't buy. I don't need a husband to complete me. I was already whole, he just didn't see it." Still, Chuka remained respectful and quiet, never pushing boundaries. One day, as he prepared to leave the foundation compound after reading stories to children, he paused by Ada's office door. He didn't knock. He simply left a single flower on her desk, no note, no expectations. Ada saw it later that evening. She smiled, not out of affection, but closure. She knew now that love wasn't a guarantee of loyalty. Sometimes people love you and still break you. Sometimes healing doesn't mean reunion. It means release. She stared at the flower for a moment and then placed it beside the framed quote on her shelf that read, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I chose to become." Later that week, Ada was approached by a widower named Tund, one of her foundation's donors. He had admired her from afar, impressed not by her wealth, but by her strength and humility. He asked if he could take her and her son out for dinner. She hesitated at first, but eventually agreed. The dinner was simple, heartfelt, and surprisingly refreshing. Tund spoke gently, listened more than he talked, and respected every boundary she set. As they laughed softly over dessert, Ada's son leaned into her and whispered, "He's nice, Mummy. I like him." She smiled, kissed her son's cheek, and replied, "Then let's see where this goes." That night, as they drove home, Ada looked out the window and whispered to herself, "I choose joy. I choose peace. I choose me." And for the first time in years, her heart didn't feel like it was waiting for healing. It was finally living in it. The day of Ada's National Award ceremony arrived like a sunrise after a long night. The air was electric as dignitaries, media houses, and international delegates gathered at the Civic Center in Victoria Island to honor the woman who had transformed pain into power. Banners lined the halls with her story printed boldly, from homeless in labor to hero of hope. Dressed in a flowing emerald gown that shimmered with elegance, Ada held her son's hand tightly as they stepped out of the black SUV. Flashbulbs erupted like fireworks, but she didn't flinch. Her son beamed with pride, his miniature tuxedo matching her regal glow. The world now saw what she had always known in her heart. She was not just a woman who survived a man's betrayal. She was a phoenix, reborn in fire and rising with wings made of grace. Inside the hall, as her name was called and applause thundered, Ada walked to the podium with poise, her heart full but steady. She began her speech with silence. A full minute passed before she spoke, and in that silence, the weight of her journey spoke louder than words. "I stand here not because I am perfect or without scars," she began, her voice strong and clear. "I stand here because I refuse to let pain define me. I was abandoned in labor, humiliated, stripped of dignity. But I chose not to become bitter. I chose to become better. The audience was silent, captivated. She continued, I want every woman listening today to understand this. Being desperate for love is not a crime, but staying in what breaks you is. Your love is not meant to be begged for, bought, or bartered. Your love is a crown. If someone throws it away, don't chase them. Walk away with your crown. Cameras flashed. Influencers tweeted. The hashtag Ada the Phoenix began trending before she even stepped down from the stage. And in the back row of the audience, unnoticed, sat Chuka, eyes red, hands clapping quietly. For once, he didn't feel entitled to her. He just felt proud to have once known her. The ceremony ended with music and celebration, but Ada didn't stay long. She preferred the calm. That night, back at her mansion, she changed into a simple robe and sat on the floor with her son, building Lego castles. There were no cameras now. No applause. Just love, the kind she never had to beg for. Her phone buzzed with messages, including one from Tund, who sent her a simple text, proud of you. Dinner tomorrow. She smiled. Her son looked up and said, Mummy, you look like a queen today. She laughed softly. That's because I am one. But deep inside, she knew the truth. It wasn't the gown or the award that made her a queen. It was the broken nights, the silent tears, the strength to wake up and keep going when everything screamed for her to give up. She looked out the window at the stars and whispered to the night, to every woman out there crying in silence, your crown is coming. Just hold on. And in that moment, with her child beside her and peace within her, Ada realized she hadn't just survived. She had conquered. And her story, once filled with agony, had become a legacy. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel TOCHI Stories for more.